They noticed her clothes, not the name on her ticket. Moments later, they found themselves face to face with the woman who pays their salaries. She didn't fit the typical first-class image. That's what they'd later say in hushed tones and uneasy glances. Anita Johnson had arrived at Gate A23 at Sacramento International about 20 minutes before boarding. She was dressed simply. Gray hoodie, loose jeans, worn white sneakers. No makeup, no jewelry, and no designer carry-on like the woman next to her, clutching a caramel latte. Just a leather folder tucked under her arm, and a phone with a cracked screen in her back pocket. When the gate agent called for first-class boarding, Anita stood and quietly moved forward. A few people glanced up, noticing black no-nonsense low-key, but then quickly moved on. No big deal. But as soon as she reached the aircraft door, the tension started. The flight attendant barely looked at her ticket. Blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, expression unreadable. "Ma'am, this is first class. You must be in the wrong group." Anita remained calm. "I'm in 2A. She held up her ticket, clearly showing first class, row 2, window seat. The attendant squinted, looked again, and then gave a half-smile that wasn't quite a smile. "Are you sure this isn't someone else's ticket? Maybe it was printed wrong." "No, I booked it. That's my name on it." Her voice stayed even. Behind her, passengers began to line up. A man in a navy blazer coughed, checking his watch. A couple in their 50s exchanged glances. The attendant sighed. "I'll have to verify with someone. Please step aside." Anita didn't budge. "I'd prefer to take my seat now, if that's all right." Her voice was calm but firm, still polite, still steady. The attendant's eyes narrowed. "I'm asking you to step aside until we confirm." A younger woman in uniform appeared, trying to smile, but you could tell she'd already been briefed on the situation. "She says she's in first class," the older one muttered. The journey to seat 2A. 26 years earlier, 14-year-old Anita sat at her grandmother's kitchen table in East Oakland, watching planes cut across the sky through the window. Her grandmother, Evelyn, was at the stove, stirring a pot of gumbo that filled the small apartment with warm, spicy aromas. "You still staring at those planes, baby?" Evelyn asked without turning around. "Yes, ma'am," Anita replied, chin in her hands. "I'm counting routes." Evelyn smiled. "Routes? I figured out which ones are coming from SFO, and which are from Oakland. The Oakland ones bank harder when they turn." Anita traced the path with her finger on the window glass. "I like watching where they go." Evelyn put down her wooden spoon and came to sit across from her granddaughter. At 62, she'd raised 3 children of her own and now was raising Anita after her daughter. Anita's mother had succumbed to cancer 3 years earlier. Evelyn's hands were weathered from decades of cleaning other people's houses, but her eyes still sparkled with fierce intelligence. "You know," she said, leaning forward, "your grandfather worked at that airport. 37 years loading baggage. Never missed a day." Anita nodded. She'd heard the story before, but never tired of it. "What people don't know," Evelyn continued, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret, "is that he kept a notebook of ideas. Ways to make the baggage system better. Ways to load the plane faster. He showed it to his supervisor once." "What happened?" Evelyn's face clouded. Man laughed him right out of the room. Said, "Johnson, you just worry about lifting those bags, not redesigning my airline. Your grandfather came home that night and threw the notebook in the trash." "But you saved it," Anita said, knowing the end of the story. Evelyn nodded. "I did. And you know what? Every single thing in that notebook, every idea your grandfather had in 1965, the airlines started doing in the 80s and 90s. Every single one." She reached across the table and took Anita's chin in her hand. "So when you look at those planes, you remember something. Those people in the suits running the airlines? They're not smarter than you. They just had different opportunities. That night, Anita started her own notebook. By 17, Anita had won a scholarship to UC Berkeley's engineering program. The local paper ran a small feature. Oakland teen headed to Berkeley on full ride. The photo showed Anita in her high school graduation gown, standing next to Evelyn, both of them beaming. What the paper didn't mention was how Anita had worked evenings at the corner store to help with bills. How she'd tutored classmates in math to save for a laptop. How she'd walked 2 miles to the public library every Saturday to use their computers because their home didn't have internet. Berkeley was only 20 minutes from East Oakland by car, but it was a world away in every other sense. Anita was one of just 12 black women in her engineering cohort of over 200 students. In her first week, a professor asked if she was sure she was in the right classroom. In her second week, a study group told her they were full when she asked to join, despite having only 4 members. Anita remembered her grandmother's words and kept her head down and her grades up. She wrote everything in her notebook, not just engineering concepts, but observations about how systems worked or didn't work. Her senior project focused on logistics optimization for commercial airlines. Her professor was impressed enough to help her secure an internship at a regional carrier based in Sacramento. "This is exceptional work," he told her. "Have you considered getting your MBA after this? With your mind for systems, you could go far." Anita hadn't considered it. College had already stretched her finances thin, even with scholarships. But her professor connected her with the business school, and somehow, through a patchwork of grants, loans, and part-time work, she made it happen. At 26, armed with an engineering degree and an MBA, Anita landed a mid-level operations role at Pacific Western Airlines, a mid-sized carrier struggling to stay relevant in a consolidating industry. The airline had been hemorrhaging money for years, caught between the major carriers and the new budget airlines that were changing the game. The CEO, a former Air Force general named Richard Harmon, was known for his old-school approach. He believed in hierarchy, tradition, and doing things the way they'd always been done. The company culture reflected this, rigid, formal, and resistant to change. Anita kept her head down initially, learning the business from the inside. She spent her lunch breaks walking through hangars, talking to mechanics. She volunteered for weekend shifts in baggage claim just to see how things worked on the ground. She rode in cockpit jump seats, asking pilots about their pain points. And always, she wrote in her notebook. Now digital, a tablet she carried everywhere. 6 months in, she prepared a presentation on operational efficiencies and requested a meeting with the VP of operations. The VP, a man named Thomas Westfield, agreed somewhat reluctantly. Anita's presentation was comprehensive. A complete reimagining of how the airline scheduled routes, utilized aircraft and deployed staff. Her plan projected savings of $23 million in the first year alone. Westfield listened without expression, occasionally checking his phone. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. "It's an interesting academic exercise, Ms. Johnson," he said, emphasizing academic, in a way that made it clear he didn't mean it as a compliment. "But this isn't a business school case study. This is a real airline with real constraints." "I understand the constraints," Anita replied. "I've accounted for them. Have you? Have you considered the union contracts? The airport's slot restrictions? The maintenance schedules? Yes," she interrupted. "It's all in the appendix. Page 43. Westfield blinked, clearly not having bothered to read that far. He recovered quickly. "Well, the point is, we have people who've been in this business for decades. People who understand the realities. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but maybe focus on your actual job description for now." The meeting ended there. But Anita didn't stop. She refined her proposal, gathered more data, and built support among her peers. A month later, During a company-wide town hall where the CEO announced another quarter of losses, Anita raised her hand. "Mr. Harmon," she said when called on, standing up in a room of hundreds, "I believe I have a solution." The room went silent. Harmon, known for his temper, fixed her with a stare that had intimidated military officers and executives alike. "Do you now?" he said, his tone somewhere between amusement and annoyance. "Yes, sir. May I have 5 minutes of your time after this meeting to explain?" To everyone's surprise, Harmon agreed. 5 minutes turned into 30, which turned into a follow-up meeting with the executive team. 2 weeks later, Anita was appointed to a newly created role, Director of Operational Strategy, reporting directly to the CEO. Not everyone was happy about the promotion. Westfield, in particular, made his displeasure known, often questioning her decisions in meetings and undermining her authority with staff. But Anita's ideas worked. Within a year, Pacific Western had reduced costs by $27 million, exceeding even her own projections, and improved on-time performance by 22%. Harmon, impressed but still traditional in his thinking, kept Anita somewhat at arm's length. She was useful, but not quite one of them. The turning point came 3 years later. A major winter storm had crippled operations across the northern half of the country. Every airline was canceling flights and stranding passengers. The majors, Delta, United, American, had deeper pockets and could absorb the losses. For Pacific Western, already operating on thin margins, it was potentially catastrophic. The executive team gathered in the crisis center, watching as the map of their network turned red with cancellations. Harmon paced the room, barking orders that everyone knew couldn't be executed. "We need to get planes moving," he shouted. "Every canceled flight is costing us tens of thousands. The weather's not clearing for at least 24 hours in Chicago and Denver." The VP of Flight Operations replied. "We can't fly in this," Westfield chimed in. "And even if we could, we don't have crew. They've timed out all over the system." Anita, who had been quietly studying data on her laptop, spoke up. "I have an idea." The room turned to her. Westfield rolled his eyes. "Let's hear it," Harmon said, his tone suggesting he was humoring her. "We temporarily hub in Phoenix," she said. "Reroute everything we can through there. We cancel the short-haul flights and focus on the long hauls, which have higher margins. We offer passengers on canceled short flights vouchers to reschedule or bus transport where feasible." "That's too complicated to execute," Westfield said immediately. "The logistics alone." "I've already modeled it," Anita interrupted, turning her laptop around. "I've been tracking similar weather patterns for the past 2 years. This plan reduces our losses by approximately 60% compared to our standard storm response." Harmon studied the screen, then looked at Anita. "How quickly can you implement this?" "I have the team on standby. We can start within the hour." Harmon nodded. "Do it." Westfield's face reddened. "Richard, with all due respect." "Do it?" Harmon repeated firmly. The plan worked. While competitors floundered, Pacific Western maintained limited but strategic operations throughout the storm. When the weather cleared, they were able to resume full service faster than anyone else. The financial press took notice, and Pacific Western stock rose 7% in a single day. The next week, Harmon called Anita into his office. "You saved us about $12 million last week," he said without preamble. "That's not a small number." "Thank you, sir. I've been in this business for 30 years, seen a lot of smart people come and go, but I've never seen anyone who understands the operational backbone of an airline quite like you do." Anita said nothing, waiting. "I'm promoting you to Executive Vice President of Operations," Harmon continued. "Westfield's moving to a special projects role." What he didn't say But what everyone knew was that special projects was where careers went to die at Pacific Western. "Thank you for the opportunity," Anita said simply. Harmon nodded, then added something unexpected. "I should have listened to you sooner." Two years later, Harmon announced his retirement. The board launched a search for his replacement, hiring an expensive executive recruiting firm to find candidates. Anita, now 33, wasn't even considered, despite having transformed the airline's operational efficiency. The shortlist came down to 3 candidates: the CEO of a cargo airline, a former executive from Delta, and the COO of a hotel chain that was expanding into travel services. The board invited Anita to participate in the final interviews, valuing her operational knowledge. During the process, she asked pointed questions that left 2 of the candidates floundering. The third, the hotel executive named Martin Reed, impressed her with his answers. After the candidates left, the board chair, Elizabeth Winters, asked Anita for her assessment. "Reed's the only viable option," Anita said. "But he doesn't understand our network structure. He sees hotels, not planes. If you hire him, you'll need someone strong to run operations who can translate airline specifics." Winters, a former banking executive who had joined the board recently, studied Anita thoughtfully. "Someone like you? Ideally." Winters smiled slightly. "What if we skip the middle step?" "I don't follow. What if, instead of hiring Reed and having you manage him, we just hired you?" Anita blinked. "For CEO? You've effectively been running this airline for the past year anyway. Harmon's been more figurehead than operator since your storm response plan. The numbers speak for themselves." "The board would never approve it," Anita said. "I'm too young. I don't have the right pedigree." Winters leaned forward. "You let me worry about the board." 3 weeks later, Pacific Western Airlines announced that Anita Johnson, 33, would become the youngest CEO in the company's history, and the first black woman to lead a commercial airline in the United States. The announcement sent shockwaves through the industry. Aviation blogs questioned her experience. Financial analysts wondered if she was up to the task. Former colleagues whispered that she had somehow gamed the system. Anita ignored the noise and got to work. Under her leadership, Pacific Western transformed. She streamlined the fleet, focusing on fuel-efficient aircraft. She renegotiated airport contracts. She invested in technology that improved the passenger experience while reducing costs. But her most controversial move came 2 years into her tenure. Against the advice of several board members, she launched a bid to acquire Sunstream Airways, a struggling budget carrier with routes throughout the Southwest. "It's too risky," the CFO warned. "Their debt load alone could sink us." "Their debt is manageable if we integrate properly," Anita countered. "What they have is slots at capacity-controlled airports that would take us a decade to acquire organically." The acquisition went through, barely, with the board split 5-4 in favor. The integration was painful, with cultural clashes between the companies and technical challenges combining the systems. 6 months in, with costs running higher than projected, the same board members who had opposed the deal began questioning Anita's leadership. Rumors circulated that she was on thin ice. Then came the pandemic. Air travel collapsed overnight. Airlines everywhere were bleeding cash. Major carriers were surviving on government bailouts and massive layoffs. Pacific Western, still digesting its acquisition, was particularly vulnerable. Industry analysts predicted bankruptcy within months. Anita called an emergency board meeting. The mood was grim as members filed into the conference room, expecting to discuss the terms of a Chapter 11 filing. Instead, they found Anita standing at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by charts and data visualizations. "We're not filing for bankruptcy," she announced before anyone could sit down. "We're pivoting." While passenger traffic had evaporated, cargo demand was booming, especially for medical supplies and e-commerce shipments. Anita had already developed a plan to convert a portion of their fleet for cargo use and redeploy staff accordingly. "The Sunstream acquisition that some of you questioned?" she continued. "Their maintenance facilities in Phoenix are perfect for these conversions. We can do them in-house at a third of what our competitors will pay." For the next 2 hours, she laid out a comprehensive strategy not just for survival, but for emerging stronger from the crisis. The board, initially skeptical, gradually warmed to the plan as the numbers and logistics came into focus. Elizabeth Winters, still chair, spoke for the group when she said, "I've never seen anything like this. You've thought of everything." "Not everything," Anita admitted. "There will be surprises, but this gives us a framework to adapt." The plan worked. While other airlines took massive bailouts, Pacific Western required only minimal government assistance. They kept most of their staff employed, albeit with reduced hours. And when passenger travel began to rebound, they were positioned perfectly. Financially sound with a modernized fleet and an energized workforce. By the time the industry fully recovered, Pacific Western had climbed from the country's 9th largest carrier to 6th, with industry-leading profit margins and customer satisfaction scores. Financial media that had once questioned Anita's qualifications now hailed her as visionary. Harvard Business School published a case study on her management approach during the crisis. Fortune magazine put her on its cover with a headline, "The Airline Whisperer." Through it all, Anita remained focused on operations, still carrying her tablet everywhere, still talking to baggage handlers and flight attendants and pilots about their daily challenges. _ 5 years after taking the helm, with Pacific Western thriving, Anita faced a new challenge. A hostile takeover attempt by Global Airways, a conglomerate known for acquiring smaller carriers, stripping their assets, and eliminating routes that weren't immediately profitable. The offer was generous, a 30% premium on the current stock price. Several board members, seeing a chance to cash out handsomely, were pushing to accept. Anita opposed the deal vehemently. "They'll dismantle everything we've built," she argued in a tense board meeting. "Routes to smaller cities will be cut. Thousands of employees will lose their jobs. The culture we've created will be destroyed. Business is business," said one board member who favored the sale. "Our duty is to shareholders." "Our duty," Anita countered, "is to build long-term value. This deal benefits exactly one group. Investors looking for a quick profit who have no stake in the airline's future." The debate raged for weeks. Global Airways increased their offer, putting more pressure on the board. Anita worked around the clock, searching for alternatives. She found an unlikely ally in the Pacific Western Employee Pension Fund, which owned 7% of the company's stock. If they voted against the takeover, and if Anita could convince a few key institutional investors to join them, they might block the deal. But the pension fund had a fiduciary duty to maximize returns. The Global Airways offer was financially compelling. Anita requested a meeting with the pension board, 7 retired Pacific Western employees who now oversaw the fund. Among them was a familiar face, Harold Williams, a former baggage handler who had worked alongside Anita's grandfather decades earlier. "I remember your granddaddy," Williams said after the formal introductions. "Smartest man on the ramp. Always had ideas about how to make things better." Anita smiled, thinking of the notebook Evelyn had saved. "That sounds like him." For the next hour, Anita didn't talk about stock prices or market multiples. Instead, she shared her vision for Pacific Western's future. New routes connecting underserved communities, apprenticeship programs for high school students interested in aviation careers, environmental initiatives to reduce the airline's carbon footprint. Global Airways will kill all of this, she concluded. They're interested in our landing slots and our balance sheet, not our people or our communities. Williams glanced at his colleagues, then back at Anita. What's your alternative? I want to take the company private, she said. I've been working with a group of investors who believe in our vision. The offer won't match Global's dollar for dollar, but it will be fair, and it will preserve what we've built. You're asking us to leave money on the table, one pension board member pointed out. I'm asking you to invest in sustainable value, Anita corrected. Our plan projects higher returns over a 5-year horizon than what Global is offering today. After she left, the pension board deliberated for hours. The next day, Williams called with their decision. They would support her plan on one condition. We want a seat on the new board, he said. Someone who represents the workers who built this airline. Done. Anita agreed without hesitation. With the pension fund on board, Anita secured the support of enough investors to counter Global's offer. 3 months of intense negotiations followed. The business press characterized it as a David versus Goliath battle, with most analysts predicting Anita would eventually be forced to concede. They were wrong. Through a combination of strategic alliances, innovative financing, and sheer determination, Anita and her investor group prevailed. Pacific Western Airlines would go private under her leadership, free from the short-term pressures of the public markets. The deal closed on a Friday. The following Monday, Anita called an all-hands meeting at the airline's headquarters in Sacramento. Thousands of employees packed the hangar, with thousands more watching via live stream from airports across the country. Anita stepped to the microphone, her expression serious. For the past 6 years, she began, I've had the privilege of leading this company through challenges that many thought would break us. We've not only survived, we've thrived. And we've done it together. Every single person who keeps these planes flying safely and on time. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. As of today, Pacific Western Airlines is no longer a public company. We answer to ourselves now, to our values, our vision, and our commitment to each other. A cheer went up from the crowd. But there's one more change I want to announce, she continued when the noise subsided. Effective immediately, we're changing our name. Pacific Western Airlines is now Evelyn Air. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Only a few people knew who Evelyn was. Named for my grandmother, Anita explained, her voice catching slightly. A woman who taught me that with enough determination and the right opportunities, we can all soar. She paused, collecting herself. She didn't live to see this day. But everything we've built, everything we will build, honors her belief that everyone deserves a chance to fly. This time, the cheers were deafening. That was 3 years ago. Today, Evelyn Air is the fastest-growing airline in North America, known for its employee ownership model, exceptional service, and commitment to connecting communities that larger carriers have abandoned. And Anita Johnson, now 42, still sits in seat 2A whenever she flies. A reminder of where she started and how far she's come. Which brings us back to today, at Gate A23 in Sacramento International Airport, where a woman in a hoodie and worn sneakers is about to board a plane that bears her grandmother's name. The younger one turned to Anita. Hi there. Let's just clear this up real quick, okay? Could you step over here? It wasn't the words. It was the tone. Like they were trying to de-escalate something that hadn't even escalated yet. The kind of tone Anita had heard before. Measured, careful, like they were anticipating a scene, because of who she was. I don't understand what needs to be cleared up, Anita replied. That's my name, my seat, my ticket. A man in line muttered something under his breath. A teenager behind him chuckled. The older flight attendant folded her arms. Look, if this is going to be a problem, we can have you board after the rest of the plane has seated. That's when someone behind Anita finally spoke up. Let her through, said a woman in her mid-60s, already sitting in 1B. She's got a ticket. What else do you want? It didn't seem to help. Anita inhaled slowly, then exhaled through her nose. She pulled her phone from her pocket, opened the screen, dialed. Hi, it's me. Yeah, I'm at the gate already. Can you come up? She didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw around titles. She just made a simple phone call. The attendants stared at her for a moment, unsure what to make of it. The couple in line glanced at each other again, this time more curious than skeptical. The teenager lowered his eyes. A small girl in row 4, curled beside her mom, looked up from her juice box and watched quietly. Something was happening, but they didn't know what yet. That calm phone call was about to shift the entire atmosphere of the plane. The call ended without drama. No big show. Anita simply slipped the phone back into her pocket and stepped to the side as requested. Her face didn't flinch, didn't harden, just quiet stillness, like someone who'd been through this more times than she should have. Passengers continued filing in, some watching her, others pretending not to. That woman in 1B glanced over again, this time with a longer stare. The kind that says, I've seen this happen before. A man 2 rows behind Anita, with silver-rimmed glasses and a Stanford Law sweatshirt, leaned slightly toward his wife and whispered. She probably scanned the wrong gate. His voice wasn't angry, just sure. He never considered that maybe, just maybe, she belonged exactly where she was standing. The young flight attendant tried softening things. We just have to follow protocol. I hope you understand. Anita didn't answer right away. She looked at the name badge. Caitlin, then nodded once. I understand more than you think. Her tone wasn't sharp, but it landed. The air in the cabin tightened slightly. One of those moments when people feel something shift, even if they can't explain why. 2 minutes passed. Then 3. Still no movement. Anita stood still, barely blinking. The older attendant kept her arms crossed. Caitlin glanced at her, waiting for guidance, but none came. And then, voices at the front. The doors opened again. A man in a gray blazer, with a badge clipped to his chest, stepped into view. He wasn't security, wasn't TSA. He looked like management. Someone who didn't normally walk into planes mid-boarding. He scanned the cabin quickly, then spotted Anita, and broke into a smile. There you are, he said, walking straight up to her. The flight attendant stiffened. Miss Johnson, I'm so sorry for the delay. He opened his arms slightly, the way people do when they're happy to see someone they admire. And then he hugged her. Warm, respectful, no hesitation. Passengers shifted. The man in the law sweatshirt frowned. The couple looked surprised. The teenager leaned forward. Anita smiled back, small and subtle. Appreciate you coming. Of course, had to make sure everything was smooth. This your first time flying on your own aircraft in a while. Couple months. She turned toward Caitlin and the senior attendant, both now standing completely still. I believe there was a question about my seat? The regional director glanced at the crumpled boarding pass still in Caitlin's hand. He took it, verified the details, and then addressed the older attendant directly. She's in 2A. She always sits in 2A. He turned to Anita. Would you like an escort to your seat? I'll manage. She moved past them, finally walking the short distance she'd been denied. As she walked down the aisle, the silence was palpable. Some passengers quickly looked away, while others stared openly. The little girl in row 4 couldn't stop watching. Her mother leaned in and whispered, "She owns the airline." The girl's eyes widened. "She does?" The woman nodded slowly. "She built it herself." In 2A, Anita sat down, and the seat fit her perfectly. She buckled her seatbelt, placed her folder on the tray table, and stared out the window, saying nothing further. The regional director gave a quick nod to the attendants and left the plane. For a full minute, no one spoke. Then, in a low voice, the older flight attendant asked, "Why didn't she say who she was?" Caitlin didn't respond. She just bit her lip and looked down. Because sometimes, people shouldn't have to announce their identity. Anita's silence spoke louder than any title ever could.